Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. And I am so pleased to welcome back Rebekah Hirsch. Hello, Rebekah.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
So last time we were talking about your work around the Peter Pan complex. This time we're talking about something very different, and it is this marvelous book by Liz Greene, which is called Apollo's Chariot, the meaning of the astrological sun. And well, we were just having a little chat about it because you've been rereading it, and I know that you studied with Liz Greene. So maybe it would be a good place to get a sense of your impression of the book this time round as you've reread it.
Yeah. I'm so pleased that you asked me to read it because the timing was absolutely perfect. As I was just saying, I'm having a big transit to the sun myself. And just reading the book, and I was getting so many insights and remembering what a brilliant astrologer and writer Liz Greene is. For me, she really is the top. And if young people today haven't come across her work, don't miss the chance. She writes with such wonderful clarity. The message comes across so clearly, and she's such a great scholar, but she's not dry at all. Really, it is such a fantastic book. Everybody should read it. It should be on the curriculum at school. It's so important, talking about the sun. Yeah.
So, what do you feel is the reason why talking about the sun is so relevant?
Rereading it was reminding me about the importance of the sun. Now, when I was young and I was first studying astrology, I had a little bit of a feminist thing saying, well, what about the moon? And then I had a lot of questions about the ascendant. And now it's like, yes, yes, yes. All those things are incredibly important. But in the end, the wonder of the sun, the source of life, the source of the solar system, the source of everything, and in the chart, it's just so important. And it's very interesting studying the other planets, but the sun is central to everything.
It is. It's the center of the solar system. And I know that there is, of course, a huge importance with the moon and with the ascendant. But astrology, Western astrology, is about our relationship with the sun.
Yeah.
Everything revolves around the sun. It's about our experience of being on a planet that has the sun at the heart of the solar system. And everything revolves around the sun, which means that from an astrological perspective, it always comes back to the sun, which is obvious because we are represented by the sun. The self is represented by the sun. And as much as we want to empathize and put ourselves in other people's shoes and collaborate with others and be part of a collective, because we are part of humanity and we are part of nature, etc., we still only have one pair of eyes.
Yeah.
And we still only have one filter, the filter of our experiences through which we see the world. And flawed or blessed though that filter might be, and for us, it is both. For all of us, it is both.
Yep.
It is our perspective. And the whole of life, it seems to me, is about making sense of the world and adjusting that filter according to new information, and in the process, discovering more about who we are. So it always, in the end, does come back to the sun, because however hard we try to not be self-centered, by virtue of the fact that we can only know the world through our experience, that means that we are always going to be somewhat self-centered, hopefully tempered with wisdom and empathy and the ability to imagine and put ourselves in other people's shoes. But to do that, we have to know who we are, and we have to have a strong sense of who we are.
You know, it's one of the things that Liz refers to as potential to slightly sabotage the development of the son in childhood. Is there's an enormous message in us about selfishness and the fear of being selfish and self-centered. And of course, the other end of that spectrum is narcissism, which is another, the narcissistic wounding is something that affects the sun and goes with the sun in terms of psychological astrology. So that fear of showing up, of shining too brightly, in some ways it connects back to what we're saying about the puer aeternus, about Icarus flying too close to the sun. You know, that is the fear, and the fear that we won't be liked or that we're showing off. And one of the words that occurs quite often in Liz's book is something about the loneliness. Like the fate of a human being. In the end, you're on your own. You know, in the end, it's me. And yes, you can have wonderful, profound relationships and friendships, and other people are so important, but there's something about the sun. Is who am I? And what did I come here to do? And that, you know, Jung spoke about the loneliness of it. It's that being myself, and then the worry then is that the fear of loneliness and the fear of selfishness or the fear of the narcissism or whatever stops us in any way from being on that path, which is central to being alive on this planet.
She does actually talk about the fact that this idea of the self is unfashionable. And she was writing this in the late 90s, and it has got so much worse.
Yes.
So much worse since then. And although we say it's become unfashionable, I don't think it's ever been fashionable. Because the fact of the matter is that there is always a tension between the individual and the collective. And the collective is constantly trying to make the individual forget its individuality for the sake of the collective. And of course, when we say the collective, really, we're not talking about the collective. We're talking about authority directing the collective as it chooses. So we have to remember, really, that it's the people at the top who direct the social trends. And, you know, we're very aware in our time that certain things in certain types of media, algorithms promote them or ban them. Now, I'm going to quote from her. This isn't a good thing or a bad thing. It just is. It just is. And we can decide whether we like that or not, but it is. And what I'm pointing out here is that this tension has existed always, to the point where many world religions, if not all, certainly most, talk about the need to, or promote promote as desirable selflessness, and anything that is akin to an individual standing up becomes selfish. So there is this current that has always been there that is totally disempowering. And we've now added to that psychological terms like narcissism, which is bandied about without any true understanding of what the definition actually is. And of course, definitions, as we know, can be changed and manipulated according to the interests of whoever has the ability to do that. So there is very much that element of things that is operating. And so, you know, there's a part right at the start of the book where she says, I would like to look at what kinds of problems and conflicts, internal and external, might stop the sun from shining in an individual's life. There is always a problem with the sun. It is the nature of the sun to have to struggle in order to give light. And if you think about it, that's so true. It's exactly how we experience the sun physically. It disappears every night.
Yeah.
It disappears if you're in the northern latitudes, or if you're not in the equatorial part of the world. There are seasons, and the sun disappears for a period of time before coming back. It is the nature of our experience that we are struggling that the sun struggles to give his light, and so do we struggle. And that will be for any number of reasons. And, you know, you were talking about the different pathologies associated with, some people might think too much sun, but actually that's not about too much sun. That's about too little. It's when the individual is not secure that it becomes totally self-obsessed. And that it becomes completely narcissistic. The tendency to be narcissistic is increased 100-fold, etc. This is not about having a big ego. It's about having too small an ego.
No ego.
Or no ego. Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot in what you've said. In the mythology of the sun, we, you know, all religions, tribal traditions, whatever, have a way of honoring the sun. And very often our mythology includes the battle between the solar principle and some kind of dragon. So we've got, in Babylon, we've got Marduk and Tiamat, or, you know, it's some kind of dragon slaying. And as you say, the sun sets every night, and, you know, in Egyptian mythology, it's Osiris, it gets dismembered, comes back, you know. So there is a cycle to do with the sun, which is personal and collective, to do with, it's an endeavor. And Liz says many times in the book, it's not there right from the start. Young people, you know, it's a developmental thing, and it never stops. The old, you know, as you get older, you get better and better at it, but it's not finished. There's always a struggle, and this is very much the sun representing the archetype of the hero or the heroine. There's something that's got to be taken on. There's a dragon that's got to be slain. There's a gorgon. There's a sea monster, and then when that process is complete, there's a little bit more of the sun has come into consciousness. You know, But yes, it's not a given at all. And sometimes I think in what you were saying at the end, sometimes people are not like their sun sign. You know, you've got the chart ready, and then this boy, well, who is this? You know, and so as you're saying, we have things to overcome in order to bring through more and more of the light of consciousness, the light of the sun. And as you say, things like narcissism, or, you know, there are signs that somehow, in the terms of psychological astrology, the principle of the sun has not been adequately or properly mirrored to the child when they're growing. And just a bit of the book that I found terribly important is about what happens to a child. And always, this is not saying you're a bad parent, look what you did to the child, but this is what happens, that for perfectly good psychological reasons, one of the parents or both attaches onto the child and has an agenda about who this child is, you know, projecting their own needs and wishes and fantasies onto the child. And children are programmed to please the parents, you know, and so they desperately trying to meet these parental requirements. And this is narcissistic wounding, when the child is not seen for themselves and they don't know who they are.
One
And
of the
that's something to do with wounding to the sun. Yeah.
it completely is. And you know, I don't know how many hours I've clocked doing regression work, you know, as a hypnotherapist, as an analytical hypnotherapist. But there's a theme that comes up again and again when people regress into childhood memories. And the child they're recalling childhood events very much through the child's eyes. And I ask, does mommy love you? Or does daddy love you? And the answer very often emphatically is no. Now, that's not necessarily true, but that's the feeling of the child in that moment. And I say, what makes you think that? And we're not talking about cases of abuse or neglect. And the answer comes back, they don't understand.
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah.
Or they don't listen.
Yeah.
And that, I cannot tell you how often that happens. And I think this is the accidental wounding, where, you know, that even parents who are working hard to avoid that pitfall can fall into that if the child does not feel understood. So this is about, you know, being heard as well. And I think it's just so vital. There's something here as well that she says. She's talking about the myth of Apollo, and how Apollo is the carrier of the sun. He's not the sun. People often make that mistake of thinking that he is he is the sun, but he is not. And I think it's really important, because she says, Apollo is a vessel, a container for something that the Greek mind did not anthropomorphize, the one, the fiery core of Godhead. And I think, and then she goes on to say, the sun in the horoscope is not divinity itself. None of us is God. We all have the sun in our birth chart, but so does every cat, dog, chicken, and bumblebee. If Apollo is an image of some archetypal quality within us, and he is equivalent to the astrological sun, then the sun in the horoscope symbolizes a vessel, a container for something else, which lies outside the horoscope and beyond mortal life, but which, as the Emperor Julian said, engenders and infuses our incarnate existence. And I think within those lines, is the absolutely clear reason as to why we need to honor that
Yes.
within ourselves. And what happens when we fail to honor that within ourselves is mayhem and all the different pathologies that we could possibly name. It's because we're not able to honor ourselves. And that comes from society, authority figures, as well as, and from a personal level, it comes from our family, our parents, and indeed our immediate friends, etc. So this is the tension that we all have within ourselves, that we need to tread a path in which everyone has an expression and opinions and ideas, all of which need to be honored whilst we honor ourselves.
Absolutely. You've picked on a section of the book. I think I've got it written down somewhere. And this principle of the sun as a container for something that is, you know, for the divine, for spirit, for the universal energy, you know, is very, very important. Because, yes, we encounter difficulty. Not a soul on the planet does not encounter difficulty in the expression of the sun, in the expression of their authentic core. My teacher, Barbara Brennan, talked about the universal energy field spirit and the core star, that each one of us has a core star. I should think every mouse, every squirrel, we have that point at which we emerge from the other dimension, the dimensions of spirit and so on. And the sun is the pointer to that, to our uniqueness, to it's like a task or a purpose that we embody, that absolutely nothing else, no one else in the universe can take on that role. We have this incredible uniqueness as this point of emergence from the divine, and it's not easy. On this planet, we encounter all the things that you've mentioned, those Saturnian things or Pluto, you know. Nevertheless, you know, it's like, don't be afraid, because this light of this, which the sun which Apollo, you know, channels through us, is huge, and never leaves us, and it's eternal. You know, most spiritual teachers will tell you that that part of us, that divine spark, cannot be hurt. It can't be damaged. That it's in human life, then you get, and it's not a mistake. In a way, it's not a mistake. You know, you get the parents, maybe it's a mistake, but you get the parents that are, you know, you'll see them in the chart. You'll see the Saturn and the Pluto in the 4th and the 10th houses, or conjunct the moon, you know. You'll see what's going on in the family and who is able to see and reflect the child and who is not. And this is such a universal experience of growing up and not having the right kind of reflection, not being listened to, not, you know, being a little bit invisible to parents, to friends, learning to conform in order to compensate, and losing sight of that inner light. Some adults have really lost it. There's a brilliant bit in the book where Liz talks about being like a polo, you know, the mint with a hole, or like a donut, like inside there's emptiness. I don't exist. But of course you exist. And every living being does, because we all have this wonderful gift of life, and that we all have the sun in the chart. And then what you're doing then is looking at the chart and saying, okay, you know, what is this? What is the sun trying to tell me? What are the aspects to the sun showing me? and what is my uniqueness, and what is, and the word vocation, comes up so much, what have I come here to create? What is my calling? So yes, there are things, that society tells you, get over there and be like that. And social media says, yeah, you're all wrong. You've got to be like that. And your parents are saying, well, actually, you should be like that. And everybody's got an agenda for you. And there's a whole piece about trust, that this learning to trust yourself, learning to go within, and I'm making it sound like you just turn around and there you are. But this lifelong struggle, who am I really? Is that really who I am? Yeah.
And the thing is that at any moment, we always think we know who we are. We have moments of doubt, true, and there are times in life where we go, I feel like I've lost myself, or I don't know who I am anymore. Those really tough transits can do.
Yeah.
But on the whole, we think we know who we are. We are our name. We are the family from which we came. We are our culture. We are the things that we have done. But as I progress along my own life's journey, I realize that even though as a child I had certain traits that could be attributed to my sun sign, and that in my teenage years and in my early adulthood, those traits kind of changed or became more pronounced, or other traits from the sun sign came in that were not there. It seems to me that my understanding of that sign is deepening with every year that passes, because on the surface there's the traits, but what's happening is that as we mature, we begin to understand the traits and what that means in terms of defining and refining our sense of self.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. There's a lot that's very difficult about getting old, but it's not, this is true, that as you get older, the clarity of who am I and so on, letting go of other people's expertise, it does get more and more easy. And there's a very important thing about codependency. And I actually will never forget Liz giving us, doing somebody's chart when I was training at the Center for Psychological Astrology, and a young woman who was having a terrible time in relationships. And it's like, in the end, what's happening with the sun? What's happening with the sun? Because if you're a young person and you've lost that sense of the sun, of your own divine light, and then you project it onto somebody else, you project it onto your partner, or, as a parent, you project it onto your child, and that doesn't go well. And if you're in a relationship where the partner is the one with all the light and all the fire, it's not going to work as a relationship. And the antidote to codependency is to find the light of the sun. And the sun goes with creativity. So Liz talks in the book about the golden child, the fifth house in the chart, sign of Leo, and the playfulness of a child when they're creating. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to become an artist or a musician or anything. It's all kinds of creativity, whether you're building a house or making a meal or, whatever it is, or a career, your vocation, your career. And, but with the sun, when you're with your vocation, it's always going to be joyful, difficult, yes, challenges, yes, but it gives you that sense of purpose and meaning, and the creative process of which is amazing. You know, what a gift of the sun, because when we create, we go from nothing to something. So I'm also a painter, and I teach art. And what I love is when I see a young person going from nothing to something. They something is brought into being by them for them. And what is really good is if it's not with some kind of purpose of seeking approval, but it's just this. And a lovely bit in the book where Liz is talking about how you actually escape the confines of the world. You get to go beyond Saturn when you're really in the creative process, a bit like the fool in the tarot. You're stepping over the cliff. You don't know what's going to happen. All you can do is trust that this creativity will flow through and that something will emerge from it. And that is an incredibly joyful and totally personal experience. Nobody can give it to you.
No. And I think one of the saddest phrases that I often hear people say is, I'm not very creative.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What they mean is that they don't feel that they are very skilled in a craft of some kind.
Yep.
And I think where I feel why that's so sad is because that's not the spirit of creativity. The spirit of creativity is to play, to allow something to flow through to play, whether it's with cooking or whether it's in inventing games to play with the children, whether it's problem solving. But it's a fundamental quality that is there within us. And I think I would say my dog's very creative because he's extremely playful and he innovates all the time. He makes, I can remember going out on walks with him before he was 2. So I think this would have been maybe between 12 months and, sorry, between 1 and 2. And suddenly I noticed that he was taking things I had taught him and innovating on them, turning them into a game. And he'd always had that tendency, but it became very clear. And I think because he was allowed to do that, because he was, I would play with him on his terms. It gave him the confidence to develop that creativity. And to this day, he will make up games and he will take anything I teach him and turn it, some would say, to his advantage. I would say he's highly creative and enterprising.
Absolutely.
And that's within him. And it is there because I have allowed it and nourished it and encouraged it, which is the very thing that we need to be doing for our children. Yeah. And some parents do it really well. Other parents don't really know how to do that because they don't know how to do it within themselves as well.
Yes.
So, but this is such a solar principle. Incidentally, my dog is a Leo. So, completely embodying that sun energy. So yeah, I just thought of that as I was speaking. But it is that playfulness that we are talking about, to allow, you cannot discover your creativity unless you allow yourself to play.
Absolutely. And it breaks my heart because, as you say, so often, if you do any kind of thing that's going to evolve, you use the word creative and people say, oh, I'm not creative, or I'm not. And you see this depressed child standing there. And I feel like, just like maths teachers have a lot to answer for, our art teachers have a lot to answer for, because as you say, somehow a young person has been told that because they don't have the technical skill, that they're no good. And really what we're talking about here is negative Saturn and the inner critic. And the inner critic can be the biggest paralysis on creativity, because if it's not going to, if you know before you start that it's not going to be good enough, you're not going to start. And we get this message coming at us from all directions: you're not good enough.
I have had two young clients between the age of 18 and 20 who were put off careers in the arts,
Yeah.
despite being very creative, because their approach to art does not fit the current zeitgeist of what art should be.
Yeah.
And the
just going to say, there is no, the very words art should be, immediately there is no should be.
Exactly. And you can imagine how hard a time I had helping them to see that they were not wrong, because after all, an authority figure was telling them otherwise.
Yep.
And this is the tension. It comes in many different ways. I have given a talk called Creativity, Your Link to Divinity.
Yes.
It wasn't an astrology talk, but it was exactly about this principle. We need to understand, and the reason creativity is so important when we're talking about the sun is it's because it is the expression of the sun.
Yeah.
And that means it is about our ability to express who we are. And we can't be a light if we cannot express who we are with joy. And that's what creativity gives us, is that sense of our own divinity and power, because we are expressing something that is unique to us.
Absolutely. And for, the astrologers out there, look at in the end, for any person who's at any kind of crossroads or in trouble or depressed or whatever, find the sun. Everything else in the chart is very important as well, but if you can find the solar light, and it's your purpose and it's your uniqueness and it's your gift, and it's the reason that you're not a failure, and that you don't, and that your inner critic is wrong, because you are this unique carrier of this light. And if a astrologer can help the person to understand what the sun in the chart, what are the gifts it's bringing through, what are the challenges that they are likely to have met, to come back to the sun. If your problem is a relationship, if it's your career, if it's your family, if it's where you're going to live, come back to the sun, because that is, it's your immortality and it's your uniqueness and it's where you're you. And when you're with the sun and with the joy of the sun, nothing. I love that. Your creativity is your divinity. It's like, and one of the thoughts that I had when reading the book, these days we have Dr. Joe Dispenza, but way back then when I was studying astrology, it was Shakti Gawain and creative visualization. All the ideas that we create our own reality, whatever that means to you, that it's contacting that part of ourselves. And when you're really in contact with the sun, you do transcend so the difficulties and the limitations of this world, and miracles of you can awaken to things. I'm not making myself very clear here, but when you're with the sun and when you're in the creative process, then you go beyond all those limitations of critic and what have you. And now I'm sounding like that is a should, and it's not easy. And it's a constant cycle of the sun rising, and it reaches its zenith and it sets, and we're back in the dark. So don't beat yourself up when you find yourself in the dark, or don't go away from listening to this and think, oh, I have no idea, I can't create anything. It's not what you think. It's not the ability to make a wonderful clay model or to paint a wonderful picture. It's the ability to find yourself. and you know, pushing away all the other voices, family and all that. Hang on a minute. Who am I? Where am I? Somewhere in here, there's me.
Let's talk about the son and father,
Yes, yes.
because that's, again, it's become very fashionable to pretend fathers don't matter. Um, Sorry, they do. Um, what did you what do you want to say about that?
Okay. In the first place, nobody gets to this planet without a father and a mother. We have a sperm and an egg. You know, we have the principle that fertilizes and the egg that receives. And if you don't want to call it father and mother or masculine, feminine, or yang and yin, whatever, you know, this is the reality of the very first creation that matters, of the creation of a human being. And you've got, you know, millions of sperms, and they have to do a little fight to be the one that gets to the egg, and the egg just, and the egg then does all the containing, and the egg grows into the being that's going to take form on the planet. So these two principles are, to me, they're inarguable. And then when it comes to daddy, male person as father, well, you know, we have 21st century families with two daddies, two mummies, or, you know, or any arrangement of, you know, gender fluid, whatever. And I think the really important thing is to, you know, just take a step out of that, because there's a lot of change in our understanding of that. But just to say, yes, there is a sperm, there is an egg, there is the heroic fighting yang masculine principle, and there is the receptive, containing, nurturing, you know, but bringing into form the feminine principle. And I guess the son too goes with the heroic principle, whether you're a man or a woman. And then you look at the father, and you know, coming into the sort of more personal life. Was there somebody that was holding it could have been, it can be a mummy or a daddy, you know, was there somebody holding up the father principle about, you know, being able to take action and go out into the world and make something out of nothing? And very often there isn't. We're not good at that, you know. You know, we're not totally, you know, there's plenty of great fathers out there and great women in the father role, whatever. But that, yeah, that is what we're looking for so much in our society. So where is the father principle? Yeah.
It's the yang energy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yang energy is really important. It I remember maybe about a year and a half ago, I was thinking about yin and yang, and I was thinking, you know, we really need yin energy in, you know, to temper some of what's going on in our world, to soothe, to heal. But
Sure.
then,
Yeah.
but then it was like a little light bulb moment, because without yang energy, a woman can't give birth,
Mm.
because that's about pushing out. We need both yin and yang. Um,
Yes.
and I think if we're talking about the role of father, that's the yang energy modeling, as you said, the hero's journey of confidently going out into the world. And actually, if fathers are doing it, if fathers are being good fathers, if they're doing a reasonably good job, it's one of the things that they seem to instinctively do is push the child out. Whereas obviously we're speaking in very general terms, but there have been several studies that show that fathers seem to have an easier time doing this than mothers, where mothers tend to want to hold on a little bit. Fathers, although being very protective, are also pushing the
Yeah.
child into the world. And one of the things through which they do that is very physical play. And
Yes.
you can see, I mean, I was coming out, going into the woods to walk with Teddy recently, and out of there was a man who who had his little child, and basically it wasn't throwing her in the air, but he was kind of moving her about as if she was on some amazing ride in, you know, in a fun fair, and she was loving it. Now I have never seen a mother do that. And I do remember my dad, and I must have been very little for this to be for this to have been possible. But I remember him kind of just throwing me, not huge distances, but he and friends sitting round whilst the women had gone off. And they were just passing me from one to the other like a ball. And I was having the best time. I was loving that. And I can't, you know, imagine my mother. Um, in fact, I think there may have been a reason why they did that when the women weren't around.
Yes. 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 Yes.
But what does that do? That extends the child's sense of possibility and encourages the child to take risks. See, these are solar principles.
Yep.
You know, the hero needs to be able to take risks, needs to be able to have the confidence to move forward. And I think if fathers are doing a good job, that's what they're doing for their children, in a whilst at the same time helping them to feel safe to do that.
Absolutely. And in, you know, in classical psychology, that's very much seen as the masculine role. If we think of the myth of Persephone, when Hades comes to, you know, to drag her down into the underworld, um, in a way, this is the intervention of the masculine principle.
It is, but I think it's there's something more to that too, because there have been studies that have shown that young girls are more likely to start menstruation early if they don't have a father
Mm.
in their lives.
Yeah.
And they it's been attributed to an evolutionary
Uh-huh.
biological thing where, you know, they're wanting to connect with the male,
Yeah.
or and to be protected, and we don't know about anything about a father figure in Persephone's life. It's very much the mother.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Yes.
I don't,
Yes.
there are many ways of looking at that myth, obviously, but you just saying that made me think about that. I think one thing we can say is that when girls feel loved by both parents and they feel confident in themselves, the hormones come in, but I think they're more regulated, if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
They're not, you know, they're going to have crushes, they're going to do all the girl things, you know, but it's different to actually wanting to be very sexually active
Mm-hmm.
early on,
Yes.
because they're not looking for that validation
Yeah.
from, you know, from through love by someone else. So I think they're less vulnerable. I think what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is that girls are stronger and less vulnerable when they feel that love from.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I'm talking about girls obviously because of, you know, we were talking about Persephone in the myth, but
Mm-hmm.
it is an interesting. There are lots of interesting studies out there on this around this and the role of fathers and what happens when fathers are absent. Um, in ways, the effects are things that we might be surprised by.
Yes, I think very, very interesting what you're saying, the way that we, somatize the body starts to act out the emotional drama, internal drama. And, personally, having been born in the middle of the 20th century, I've been through some struggles with the changing awareness around gender. I'm getting much better at it with some very useful talks with young people. So it does seem like, beginning of the age of Aquarius, that this is very much in flux. And and you read a bit of Jung or a bit of any of the early analysts, and you think, okay, that's not the way people think about it these days. So, but I think what you're saying is there's in these old myths or in classical psychology, there is still the profound truth of how much we need the father. It's the father who reflects, as you say, the ability to separate, the ability to become oneself, and not to stay constantly enmeshed. There's that bit in the book when Liz is talking a lot about Neptune, and when you're a little tiny baby, you need to be enmeshed with mother. You need to be in that Neptune space where you are at one, getting fed or in the womb or whatever, and that is all good and right. And then what we're talking about today is the need for the solar principle to come through and take over. And we can't, well, you can live your life in that Neptune space, but there's going to be a lot of Neptunian problems with that.
There is, and it is part of growing up, because you need you need somebody to orient you away from mother, so that you can begin that process of separation and individuation. And very often, that is, father. It could be a grandparent as well,
Yeah.
Or grandparents. And I think, I want to say that there are plenty of women out there with lots of yang energy,
Yep.
who actually perform that function,
yes,
better than the actual fathers. And there are plenty of men out there with lots of yin energy who perform the mothering function, the nurturing function, better than mothers. This is a highly individual thing. And but we are using these, let's call them classic or traditional terms, to
yes,
illustrate a point of energy here. And so
agreed.
it's
Yes.
it and it is the case that for the most part, men do take on that fathering role, and are, many of them are very good at it. um and equally, it's usually women who take on the mothering role, and many of them are very good at it. I think it's that balance, though, that's needed within each of us, to not become, if we're doing the nurturing thing, to become so clingy, I think is the word I'm looking for, of the child, and protective of the child, that the child gets stifled with too much nurturing, or not doing enough of it as well. And equally, on the other side, to not be too pushing the child out to the point where they don't feel safe, or too too much yang,
Yeah.
where the child is put at risk.
Yeah.
There was another study that was done, that I came across years ago, that showed that men's testosterone levels actually drop when they are about to become fathers. And during the first, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, I think, of the baby's life. Reason being, not too much of that around the little baby. We want,
Absolutely.
a bit of empathy, a bit of nurturing and protectiveness, and then it goes back to normal again.
Yeah.
And I thought that was
I
fascinating.
love that. I love the way what you're saying about how the body is responding
Yeah,
to the situation.
I think that's fascinating. And we need to remember too that in utero, the baby is aware of both mother and father's voices, responds to father's voice. It's the familiar voice. Obviously, if it's grandmother or grandfather also that are there, the baby recognizes that voice before it's out in the world. So this is really very important. Again, all part of that development of the sense of self. And these principles are things that we are all having to explore within ourselves due to the parenting that we received, or trying to balance them in ourselves for the sake of the children that we have. And I think that this is where a book like this is so beautiful, because it helps us to come to a higher understanding, I think.
Absolutely. It's a small book, and some of Liz's books are about 5 times that size. I would recommend it to anybody. I think I never know whether it would be accessible to beginners astrologers, but if you've got enough of the language, she's pointing to something that is so important. You find yourself. That's why we come here, to be who we are, to bring through our uniqueness. Find your calling, find your vocation. Step out of this dimension and into. Oh, she talks about the as if world, which I call the imaginal realm, the ability to go beyond the limitations, and it's the fire principle really of imagination. Just it's such a great guide to the inevitability of the struggle, the inevitability of the problems to a greater or lesser degree. Some people have appallingly terrible experiences with parents, and some people it's pretty good. Doesn't matter. Look at the chart, what's going on, and what's trying to happen, because the chart is never trying to send you to hell. The chart is always saying, well, look over here, and here's the sun. And have you got that sense of the sun? And if the sun's in the 4th house, or if it's conjunct Pluto, or in the 12th, okay, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for you. So get conscious, get aware, look for it. Where is it? What happened? Find it, and then, and make these wonderful, joyful, and difficult journeys into the realm of the sun.
Well, I think we can sum it up by saying find your light. And
Yes.
the book to help you on that quest to finding your light is called Apollo's Chariot, The Meaning of the Astrological Sun by Liz Greene. Rebekah, thank you so much for taking the time to come and, well, to enjoy it and discuss it with me today.
Absolute pleasure. I'm so glad that you pointed me towards this book, because I haven't read it for such a long time, and it's like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Yes, thank you.
Now, if people want to find you and learn more about what you do, how do they do that?
So where's my book? I've got my book. I never have my book. I've written a book called Charting the Soul, Astrology, Characterology in the Human Energy Field, which is available on Amazon. Just look Rebekah Hirsch and you'll find it. I have a website which is called chartingthesoul.com. I'm on Facebook. And I will just say I've just launched an Eventbrite ticket for an event that I'll be doing. I'm going to be doing 6 teachings on archetypal astrology later this year, starting in October, I think. And I'm going to do a free taster session at the end of September. So anybody who thinks, because my way is always the archetypes that I've studied with Liz. That's it for me. What are the planets and what are they telling us? And do find me on Facebook or on my website. And thank you very much, Anna, for promoting me.
Well, I will be putting a link to your website in the description box.
Thank you.
In fact, I am also, you just reminded me that I should mention what I'm up to. And coming up in September, I believe starting on the 5th of September, I am doing a course on transits called Working with the Gods. So if you are interested, do get in touch. And if you are new to astrology, you can also get in touch because coming up on the 22nd, I am starting the first of a 3-part module of an introduction to all the characters that you would need to know to come to grips with your chart. So if you are interested, my website is in the description box. And until next time, well, next time we are looking at Chiron. Until then, have a great week. Goodbye.
Bye then.